Here we go. All right, are we there? Okay. I'm alive. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Odds Pods, this version on the new moon, not really on the new moon, but just shortly thereafter. Coming to you live from Brussels, where I have adopted a Persian effect and Ramadan has started. So happy Ramadan to our Muslim brothers and sisters. And tonight's panel includes long-term favorites, Heather and Jordon and Mark. And we are here to discuss most recently what has just happened on Friday night, which was rather upsetting as an American and Dutch citizen. From this dual national perspective, I find it very unsettling because I feel that the actions and the behaviors was in such contempt and disrespect that it's clearly a sign of bullying and aggression, and we can't allow this. So I think it's a moment that's very transformative because this is a moment that I actually saw living over here on this side of the ocean. Europeans start to be like, whoa, y'all can keep your crazy over there, but don't let that shit coming over here and coming with your agenda strong, because that's not how we fly. Europeans are incredibly conservative and very quiet and tolerant, but also mild-mannered. We do not do these kinds of things, and we do not act out of order in such a sociopathic way. So right now, I feel like this is a strong turn of events because it's really securing a moment where we've entered into a very realistic World War III type of situation. And we look at an alliance between Russia and America, supposedly, allegedly, and how that impacts our relationship with the EU as an American, or from this side of the ocean, how we are looking at the potential dissolve of the EU or NATO, or whatever's going to happen out of the consequences of our Ukrainian relationship. So we're going to touch a little bit on that, cover the perspective from all of our sides, and I want to just jump right into it. But I just want to take a moment and welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And can everyone just close their eyes and give a moment of silence for those that are still suffering and having a difficult time? There's a lot of those people in the world right now. And as a mental health advocate, I feel that it's very important that we offer as much light and comfort and place of observation to hold space for our brothers and sisters that are suffering. Okay. All in authenticism. Heather, tell me what's going on in California. I haven't spoke to you in a couple of weeks. How's life over there?
Oh, it's great. I think that the events of Friday and then into the weekend here in the US have convinced me that I think that we talk about the fall of the American empire or the crumbling of the American empire. I think it's going to come from within because people are tearing each other to shreds, taking sides in this. And when you address the mental health aspect of it, I really love that you brought that up and want to focus some of this on that because I can see how this is just destroying people. I have been stunned, just absolutely stunned to see people's response. I'm actually speechless. Yeah, we're a mess over here.
Yeah.
Because it just becomes very complicated. We have obviously diametrically opposed viewpoints about who was the aggressor on Friday, what was justified, what was unjustified, and how to deal with Trump. And I think that a lot of people that are in American politics know to deal with Trump with flattery, but I don't know that people outside of the US want to do that anymore. And that's actually what Friday's events showed me, is that Europe does not want to flatter him anymore, probably justifiably. I think you saw my post on Facebook, I've compared to the way Newsom deals with Trump. He kisses the ring. He does. He flatters him. Anybody that has ever watched any interactions between Governor Newsom and Donald Trump, no, can I swear he's up his ass?
Mhm.
but I don't think that Europeans are going to do that anymore. And here in America, we have now a deep divide of people that are saying, we're not going to do it anymore either. And then people that say, no, this is how you deal with Trump. But they're all here. Like, these people are all here. We're fighting here. And now very opposed to or in opposition to the Europeans. So it's a mess.
Yeah, I feel that too. It's very heavy. Jordon, you're in an interesting situation where you are on secondment as an American abroad and working in Poland at the moment. So you see things from a very different perspective because you're surrounded by other international people that are experiencing a different story maybe than you are as well. How's it going with you?
Things are going better than they were in the past couple of weeks. I feel like I'm starting to turn the tide with my mental health. I was really not feeling like myself. So things are going better. I feel like I'm, as time goes by, getting better at just being able to process my own emotions and take care of myself. Um,
Yeah.
and I think what's just been weighing on me mainly in terms of a source of depression and anxiety for me is just knowing how things are back at home and then being so far away and feeling a bit powerless to the situation despite wanting to remain informed.
Yeah. So I follow some other writers on Substack that are Americans abroad, and the message is all clear. And a lot of what's in my direct messages as well. Hey, what's life like over in Ireland? Guess what, folks? Life is really difficult anywhere you go right now. And the answer is not to flee from where you are. So while these Americans have pipe dreams of thinking what it's going to be like to be having a life outside of America, here's the breaking news. Not great. And the other thing is that there's a lot of American hate that's going to be coming out of this as well. There's going to be a lot of finger pointing and whatnot. So this is the time for Americans to really come together, find that camaraderie that we're known for. And what I hear Heather saying is this is just not possible. Like what's happened in the last 5 years during the pandemic, that level of disconnect is now the new norm. That's what we have to really work towards changing. And we've said it before in previous calls that resistance and revolution happens in the form of creating connections, community, forming art, sharing camaraderie, sharing a cup of tea, having conversations. So we really have to actually address the point of mental health and how this is impacting us all. Like it's really hard to have normal relationships overall because you just don't know, wait, how are they going to feel if I actually mention this and bring up this topic? It's impacting every part of our lives. So we have to protect that. We have to protect our mental health space and ensure. Yes.
I think we need to go back to Mark's point before we started recording about the billionaires and the elites, because this is something that Heather and I have harped on for years since we started the podcast is people, working class people and poor people have got to stop fighting each other. And of course, it's easy to do because of the sheer amount of economic suffering that exists, but we're never going to make any progress in our world if we keep on bringing each other down. And to your earlier point, Audra, building solidarity within our communities.
Yeah, just maybe coming on Jordan's point, it may be strange to pivot from Ukraine and what's going on in Europe and America to the issue of a wealth tax or the billionaires, but it's all linked. I really believe, and this is nothing new, that the way the people in power, the billionaires, amass their wealth and keep gaining wealth and get tax breaks and deregulate society so they can make more wealth is they want to divide and rule us. And they also want to distract us. And we know the playbook. You know, a war is actually a good way, unfortunately, of distracting us all and keeping us obedient on side. And we know that's not too far down the road now, unfortunately, the way things are. We've got to be really focused. And it's interesting what I'm hearing from our American friends, because this is the thing. Everyone is feeling very distraught, very disorientated, very divided. What we're not hearing from the Trump administration is anything they're doing to help ordinary working American people. I've not heard one thing. since he came into office that's
The
actually going to help.
stimulus check. What's the stimulus check about?
Yeah, we've heard about it, but is it true? Is it not true? Is it just a bogus idea? Who's going to pay for the check? And it's probably going to be ordinary working people, or adding to American debt, which you can't afford to pay. So I think this comes back, and I made the point on all these calls that you've been organizing, all of these podcasts, is that this is a battle not between America or Europe or Ukraine and Russia. It's about values. Do you believe in solidarity, of cooperation, of mutual respect, or is it all about competition and conflict and division? And so therefore, is it a battle between, I know it's a cliche, between a hope or hate? And I know what side I'm on. And when you boil it down, that's what all of this is about. And what we saw in the Oval Office on Friday, I think why it shocked many of us Europeans, it was a display of a battle of those two ideologies between hope and hate. The mask slips completely. Not so much Trump, it was J.D. Vance. He was the real instigator of the hate. And to give you that one example of saying, have you ever thanked us for the help that we've given? But Zelensky never stops thanking people. It's probably one of his weaknesses that he's too gushing in his thanking of people. So he just said that to stoke hate, J.D. Vance. And when I think back on Friday, it was very hard to watch Friday. But actually, Zelensky, and people have criticized Zelensky because that, as you said, that's not how you're supposed to behave. You're supposed to respect Trump, and he should have just zipped it, kept quiet. I think Zelensky performed a masterclass in how to handle Trump. He was dignified, he was resolute, he didn't lose his cool, and they hated it. Of course they hate it. But it comes back to two ideologies. I'm not saying the hope side are perfect. They're not. We're not, are we? It's work in progress. But the hate side are there. And I think going back to Jordan's point, this really links up with it's not just about war or conflict or Ukraine. It's about greed and hate and the unfairness in society. That's what we want to know. Which party, which government is going to tackle the unfairness in society? And just one final statistic from Oxfam a few weeks ago. There's a new billionaire being created in Europe almost every week. One new billionaire. So when they say they've got no money for defense, it's simply not true. We've got to start providing better services for everyone, including defense, and that means taxing the billionaires.
Yeah, tax the rich. The fact that there's so many billionaires just in the last year in Europe. Europe has never really been a culture that's been accepting of, hey, it's cool to be a billionaire here. And in fact, it's actually widely accepted not to be cool. Everybody has more equalized wealth. So yeah, it's scary to think of the themes that can come out of this. And it's a populist movement as well.
I also think that there's just a mask off moment with the American empire right now with our relationship with Russia. I don't know if you guys saw this headline that came out the other day. Trump ordered Hegseth, who's the Secretary of Defense, to step down on Russian cyber security. So it's completely out in the open and obvious to me at this point that our government has been hijacked by the Kremlin.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's really hard to wrap your head around that, because then you're looking at a scenario that we're literally living in a James Bond movie. It's happening. And it's really just hard to fathom how we got here and what we're going to do with it. But this is the reality of what it is that we're looking at and then if you actually start to do the math, it makes sense how this is happening so easily and why we are all like dumbfounded over these last basically decade going, how does this guy have so much power? Oh, if you play the Russian card, then it all adds up. It makes total sense.
And to the point about mask off and everything making sense, you have to look at the economic conditions for average Americans. I don't blame a lot of people that fall for a lot of the BS that's out there right now. I don't blame a lot of people that fall for Donald Trump's promises. And then in line with that, Putin's. And it's because we are in a very bad economic position, like average people, when we're talking about like working class people. To the point about the $5,000 stimulus checks, I'm not really sure how they plan to pay for that or they're claiming that it's money that they found that was just fraudulently being spent and they're going to somehow claw it back. The math doesn't math there.
They're claiming that there's going to be enough of a dividend
Right.
based on the money that they're going to find from inefficient government spending, so much so where
Right.
they can cut all Americans a $5,000 check, and it's bullshit. It's never going to come, and
Yeah.
even if it did come, I'm sure we would be taxed on it, and
Right. But
that revenue would
why
be taken away from us.
yeah, but why that is such a big deal in my mind is because it evidences for me how easy it would be. Let's say the $5,000 checks actually happened. How easy it would be to pacify people that are struggling so hard. It's true. People are really suffering.
This is the thing. $5,000 really isn't that much money in the current environment. It would help so many
really,
people,
yeah.
but only on a short-term base. And this is
And
what
that's
we are.
all he needs, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's just
Yeah, I
looking
mean,
for Band-Aid temporary solutions.
All you need.
It's pure. It is populism in action, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
short term. They can't afford it, but it doesn't matter. They are they're taking a wrecking ball to American democracy, but also to the American economy, and they don't care. I think that the little bit of hope this last few days is, I think what's interesting, and Jordan, you're here in Europe, so you're probably viewing this as well. It's interesting the right in Europe are getting very worried about Trump now, because the conservatives in Europe and the center right they want to preserve their power and their influence, but they don't want to take a wrecking ball to the system.
Democracy.
And democracy, whatever you want to call it here, in form of democracy, they're really worried about that. And I think what they see, again, the mask has slipped, and they want nothing to do. They look across. They thought Trump and co were conservatives, Christian Democrats, center right people. They're just wreckers, and they're out to wreck, and they're making empty promises just to cling to power. And I think my fear, Heather, as you say, maybe nearer the election, they give everyone $5,000. They don't give a shit. They just get reelected. And they just want power. They may find other methods of staying in power that may be cheaper than that, of course, unfortunately, just like Putin does in Russia. But these people are ruthless, aren't they? We see that now. And they're prepared to let people in Ukraine die, or let Europeans die. But again, and I made this point in previous pod, this is the moment, though, for Europe to step up to the plate. We shouldn't. Why? I don't understand as a European why for 80 years we've relied on our American friends. That doesn't mean we disrespect America, but how have we become dependent? So dependent, we are now being abused by our American friends. That's not happened up until now, but it's happening now. We've allowed ourselves to be part of that relationship of abuse, if you like.
It's a codependent relationship.
Exactly, that's the phrase I was trying to look for. And we've got to get out of that relationship, and only Europeans can do that. We've got to do that on our own. But I think the point I made to others before this call is that our argument isn't with the American people. We want to work with the American people. It's with the U.S. administration, this current administration. We, I'm afraid, have got to disengage with. And where Trump has a point, we want to go it alone. We should be going alone. Yep, let's get on with it.
Yeah, Jordan.
I was just going to talk about, so we don't even have to speculate about the impact of the stimulus checks. We already have a real example of this during COVID. So it was $1,200, and people
were going crazy over it,
over the moon about it.
Yeah.
And it was because of the sheer desperation that existed. And somehow it's even more severe now than it was at the height of the pandemic. So you can imagine how people would respond to $5,000 checks.
It's not a good thing. Jordan, just quickly, because I haven't checked any news reports on this week, what's the Luigi had update? I think
the latest I've heard is the cops, to nobody's surprise on this call, completely fucked up the search when he was arrested in Pennsylvania. Supposedly, he was not read his Miranda rights. Also, it sounds like the cops may have planted evidence. So it's looking increasingly likely that this will be a mistrial. Fingers crossed.
Wow. Does this attorney have enough evidence to actually push this through?
That we don't know because it's not a public trial. So it's difficult to actually listen in on her arguments. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like a just total F up by the police and brazen violation of constitutional law.
Yeah. All right. Interesting.
I think Heather has a question or something to say.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say to that point, getting back to that point about those stimulus checks and the ones that we got in the beginning of COVID, there's a conversation on Twitter right now about the child tax credit that we had under Joe Biden's first year that only lasted for 1 year. And it lifted an unprecedented amount of children out of poverty who were then immediately shoved right back into poverty after the child tax credit was taken away. And Audra, you mentioned, or Audra or Mark, you mentioned these stimulus checks would come right around the election, and the Republicans would get all kinds of credit for that. Similarly, the Republicans then blocked any child tax credit in 2003, 2004. They were pushing really hard to get that child tax credit, but the Republicans blocked it. And everybody knows that ultimately the administration in power is going to get the brunt of that. So people blamed Biden for losing that child tax credit. And I think in the same way, you would see the inverse. People would praise the Republicans in 2026 if they were to get that child tax credit, or not child tax credit, the $5,000 stimulus. And it just shows you, though, how Americans, they don't really get anywhere below the surface on what's really going on. Americans don't pay attention to who voted for what in Congress, or they don't pay attention to where that $5,000 comes from, or they don't pay attention to what happens afterwards, right? They American voters just look at like the tip of the surface.
Yeah, but
Very
that's just
much.
because we have this two-party system that's no
Yeah.
longer functional, and we don't have politicians that speak for the voice of the people anymore. There's
Yep.
no point in going to your local town halls when your voice is completely suppressed and silenced at mid-level.
Heather,
I
I think
agree.
that's going to start changing a lot because people are going to have to be forced to be educated on these topics. For the
Yeah.
longest time, the US, and this is to Mark's point earlier, has controlled global hegemony. We've been the
Mhm.
top dog, so much so the rest of the world has been reliant on the US. Things are changing, and we
Yeah.
are no longer collectively as a society going to be able to just sit on the sidelines and afford, literally in this sense, to be uneducated about what's going on, especially in our country, let alone the rest of the world.
Mm. Just to that point, John, absolutely. And I think this is where the American administration really are miscalculating. I mean, I saw on Fox News, albeit a comment, I try not to watch Fox News, incidentally, but I just couldn't resist to see how they covered the Zelensky meeting. And a Fox News commentator, and these people are quite important because next week he could well be in government, said, but America runs the world, yeah? And I was absolutely shocked when you tune into Fox News, because the Americans on Fox News really think they do run the world, Jordan, and that's no longer the case. So like they were 40% of the world economy 30, 40 years ago. They're now 20% of the world economy. 80% of the world economy is not America. In terms of exports, trade, they're 11%. Yeah, now just 11%. So America is diminished, and they can't go around anymore using imperialist tactics to bully the rest of the world. Europe, yeah, I think Europe, we've got to readjust our mindset. That's work in progress. Hope we do that fast. I think a lot of the world is now laughing at America. I really do. I think the Chinese, the Russians especially, are just laughing. And that's the sad thing. You were once proud country, founded on principles and in your constitution that many of us support. And your republic was a flagship for the rest of the world. And now look at it. Yeah, it's diminished economically, it's diminished politically, and it's diminished morally. And it's shameful. And that's why I said even the right in Europe now are saying, we want nothing to do with these people. They do not represent our values. In the meantime, though, yeah, American people are going to suffer, and we are going to suffer too, because we will go down with you. The whole global economy in the short run, there's already sign that we're slowing down. But ordinary people will, as always, pay the price. But in the meantime, China in particular, will suck up any spare assets that the Americans leave behind. So that's that, as you say,
We're already seeing that with our housing industry. Like large areas of US infrastructure is being bought up by Chinese investment companies.
yeah,
And employees. I just saw an article the other day that said that China is actively recruiting all of these federal employees that
Yeah.
are being laid off by Trump.
yeah,
Like, how stupid.
Yeah.
yeah. And certainly the next threat he's wielding is the tariffs for Europe and indeed the rest of the world. But again, I think anyone who's even looked at this at a basic level realizes the people that pay the tariff are not the people exporting the good, but the people in America who pay for the good on arrival in America. So this is just further burdening the ordinary American people, further diminishing your share of world trade, further impoverishing people. But, and this is, I guess, the big but, the billionaires, the oligarchs, will continue to do well out of this system. Their wealth will continue to increase whilst America's diminish. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? And that's that's all they care about. Yeah. I mean, I guess my question to you, Jordon and Heather, is where, I mean, it's encouraging to see people waking up, people posting on social media, people out on the streets demonstrating at Tesla franchises, or JD Vance was, I think, in Wisconsin skiing, and many of them were protesting or lining the streets, protesting against him. And there's unprecedented levels of social action now, so early in the term of a new administration. So will there be a tipping point? And I think maybe it's naive to think the midterms are the tipping point, because the Democrats clearly are not necessarily in a good position either. Give us some hope, in other words, Jordon and Heather, that people will wake up in America, just as we're beginning to wake up now in Europe.
I think people are pissed right now, even conservative voters. If you look at the responses to people that are being directly impacted by the Doge policies, there are already people in the streets. There are people raising hell at these town halls saying, what the fuck, this is not what we voted for. Obviously, they were duped. Perhaps they're not as bright, but I don't want to shit on people. They're waking up now, and the left has always been extremely pissed off with what's going on in this country for decades. Another point that I wanted to bring up was the recent changes that have been made with the Washington Post editorial columns. I don't know if you heard about this. Jeff Bezos, who obviously owns the Washington Post, has now said that we are going to prioritize freedom and free markets. So what he's effectively saying by that is this is going to be a full-on oligarchy-controlled newspaper. And if you don't subscribe to that, you are not going to work here. And besides him just wanting to be a billionaire that controls all aspect of speech, I think this is deeper than that. And this is jealousy about him and Elon Musk. This is billionaire infighting.
I agree with you. There's a lot going on there too. And it's a lot. You already see the tension that grew between Zuck and Elon in the past, right? But it was almost like it was staged. It was intentional. So this is, I think, some part of a distracting agenda that we know very little about, but that's going to come out later in the wash. I also think Bill Gates is a part of that. I think that there's going to be a lot of inner fighting between the tech bros.
I mean, it's a good point you make about the infighting, Jordon. You started off with that, how they inevitably will fall out with each other. I think you're already seeing signs of that. The Epstein files, I understand, is another good example. They were promised, they were released a couple of days ago. Apparently, they weren't quite up to what people expected, which was new revelations. They were repackaged old revelations. And there's a fight within the administration between those that have released the files and those that were covering them up, and those that still want the real files to be released. And I guess that this is the reality check, is that the shit's hitting the fan. And
I wonder why.
Why
Is it redacted? Is it because Trump is implicated in it?
Yeah.
Could it possibly be number one reason?
You might think that I couldn't possibly comment, Jordon, but yeah, it stinks. And this, I guess, will further undermine confidence in the regime from the very people that voted for them. It's, this is going to happen on an increasing scale now. As I think what we're looking for from the Europeans, what is Trump actually doing that's helping the American people?
Yeah.
The hope that I actually see right now is the sheer volume of people that are waking up to the complicity of Democratic Party leaders in all of this. I cannot believe how many people I know personally who were very heavily entrenched in the local Democratic Party who are now just flabbergasted that our local representative is just like, drive your Tesla over to Tesla and boycott Tesla. That's the best she's offering them. And then people are actually starting to look at voting records and seeing all the times she's voted on policies that she should not have been voting on.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, at the local level, at least here in California, in Oxnard, California, what I'm seeing is, as hope, is the number of people who are like, you know what, I'm done with this party bullshit. I'm going to become an independent.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to start voting with morality and conscience and with the people again, and not just, oh, this is just what we have to turn our blind eye and hold our nose and vote for these terrible people because they're Democrats. Like, we're not going to do that anymore because they're complicit in what is going on here.
Yeah,
That's the hope for me.
have you seen any recent interview with Hakeem Jeffries? Literally
Oh my gosh.
worthless.
The impotence of that man is just,
Who is this
it's
person?
embarrassing.
This is
Hakeem
the head of the
Jeffries,
Democratic Party.
he's the head of, no, he's the head of the Congressional Caucus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And his DNC counterpart, the new DNC chair, Ken Martin, is just as bad. He posted this like manifesto on Twitter about a week ago about, the path forward to defeat Donald Trump. There was no path at all in this path forward. It was just like 5 pages of complaining about Trump.
Yeah.
That was it.
And
That is their strategy.
I
Yeah.
saw him going. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I think that's that. I think we're learning as well, aren't we? Learning fast, and that's why I'm hopeful that we're not going to wait months or years to deal with Trump, or indeed that the other oligarchs or the threats from the far right in Europe, or indeed the rest of the world. Yeah, we've got to move fast not within even months or weeks, days. And we're doing it now, coming up with new policy positions, addressing the growing gap between rich and poor, for example. That's a policy position we've got to make a priority. Tackling the abuse of the media, whatever our policy positions are, but we've got to give people hope that we can make a positive impact on their daily lives now. Yeah. And that's one of my critiques of the center left in Europe, but I think it's beginning to learn that we're very good at critiquing what's wrong with everyone else and what's wrong with the right, but we're not very good at coming up with an alternative program because we're not brave enough to say what we really believe. And that's, you can't build a fair society if you have an unfair economy. And we have a grossly unfair economy, and that's got to be center stage of our alternative program. I think in Europe, you're beginning to see a bit of that now. Plus, we do have the social safety net in Europe that you haven't got really in America. And I think thank God for that. But I think the tectonic plates are shifting globally in terms of politics. And I always make this point, don't get disillusioned. Step up, not step down. Get involved in your political activities, whether you're an independent Democrat or whatever, your trade unions, your NGOs, your charities, your community group. This is a moment to get involved, not be disillusioned. Because they want you to stay at home. They want you to despair. They want your mental health to be affected.
Yeah. I'm going to bring that point home because I think it's really important to keep sharing the message to support one another right now. We're at a time in history where we really can't rely upon governmental support for taking care of our personal health, and our personal health is mind, body, and it's also soul, spiritual. So we all know and have said for as long as I've been alive that World War III isn't just about arms, and it's not just proxy wars, and it's not just tech wars. It's also a war on faith, morals, ethics, core values that we once lived by. So as we wash through, it's a war against religion as well. So as we're washing through these religious narratives and people are having to really test their faith and their relationship to their faith, we're going to see a breakdown of people having to transform and really try to find themselves. And what we'll see, not everybody can vibrate on those frequencies. There's going to be, it's like a rapture where you're going to be no longer with the people that you once connected with, because there is this ascension process where it's just part of evolution. We have to just continue to evolve in order to survive. Well, Darwin said, honey, what was the very last line of Darwin's quote that everybody always misses? It's about collaboration among the species. It's really about finding the diversity that brings us together to unite and find ways to survive. So in this diversity, hopefully we can find ways to resist and form social resistance. I do think that March is going to be a volatile month full of so many protests globally. It's International Women's Month, which actually is the day of March 8th, I think, next week. So I assume that we'll see a lot of uprising, and that's great. That's fine. But now we also know that protesting it's not as effective as it once was. And now we look at technology to where abuse of power and corrupt politicians can easily use their corrupt behaviors against the power of the people. So for my purposes, I'm working on building a formal resistance campaign, publishing the links and sites and places to go to, where to find more information. And that all comes in my articles. Also, a website will be there, centrally located. And it's not just for Americans, but for anyone that globally just wants to check in. What I'm noticing from a lot of feedback is that people are no longer wanting to follow the news. People are no longer wanting to tune in and turn on their TV. They're happy to have conversations about it, but then they want to be like, okay, that's enough now. I'm done. And there is a little bit of containment around that we have to embrace, because the news is just on a loop. It's there to distract. And no longer can we trust our media like we can no longer trust our governments. So we really need to just focus on protecting our own head and heart space as well. It's the mind, body, soul aspect that we just really have to protect. Okay. Does anyone want to add any more beef to the soup before we close?
I just want to reemphasize your point, Audra, that the thing that I am seeing people need to do more than ever after Friday is they need to turn off the TV. They need to turn off the TV. They need to log out of Twitter, and they need to go touch grass.
Yes.
To that issue of mental health, I'm stunned by what the mainstream media and social media have done to people's mental state and how they are responding. It's like they're not able to respond rationally. And when you can't respond to a situation rationally, then your policy becomes irrational, or the policy that you advocate for. And so I just think that, to your point, turn it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
Turn it off, touch grass.
just wanted to quote Timothy Leary: turn on, tune in, drop out.
And just a final thought from me, if I may. I agree very much with what Heather and Jordon has said, and obviously what you've been saying, Audra. But I think, again, for the experience on Friday, we should also reflect on how we deal with other people. And let's have more, even if you disagree with people, you can have mutual respect for people. We can treat people with dignity. You don't need to descend to that level of disrespect or just vileness and hatred. We really do not. And that's, again, what they want, that division. They want to stoke up a fight. They want us to behave like that. We shouldn't do that. As I said, if democracy means you've got to let people to express themselves, and we all reach a decision, and then we have a democratic accountability. But democracy only works if you have respect, mutual respect, and we can all practice that in our daily lives. And we should all work harder on that, because social media in particular has really polarized opinions. Particularly if most of us actually believe in the same thing, but we've all been put into different camps, given different labels. Divide and rule, like I said right at the beginning, is one of their tactics that the far right, the populists, and the oligarchs have deployed for not just this century, but for millennia. Yeah, and we can do something about that.
I think we need to emphasize good faith more. When people are making arguments, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to understand the world. They might have a different perspective than you, but we're all collectively trying to work towards a greater good, and not assuming the most negative aspects of people's personalities.
Yeah.
I also think that somebody once, and not even relative to politics or anything, but someone once told me that the easiest way to diffuse a argument or a discussion and to keep it civil is to never use you statements, right?
Yeah.
Don't accuse people of things, number one. And number two, never assume people's intentions. And I think that those are just two things that we really all need to try to do better to have more civilized conversation. I'm not saying pacify objectively horrible things or normalize it. Something people have accused me of is trying to normalize Trump. No, I'm just trying to talk about how can we move on and address this and deal with it. So no use statements. And then just think before you send. If you're online, think before you send.
Or better still, my advice has always been wait overnight, like wait overnight
Yes.
and then see how you feel in the morning. And then if you still feel that way, post it. My experience as a politician for almost 20 years was when you speak to people on the doorstep or in the street, even if they have different party positions, they may be polarized opposites in terms of their affiliation. But when you speak about issues in a respectful way, it's amazing how much you agree on. It really is, because most people in their hearts are good people. I really believe that.
Yeah.
And that should give us a lot of hope that across the aisle, there's actually good people too. It's just they've been sucked into a negative, if not evil, vortex of hate. And we've got to hold out, unlike them, we've got to hold out the hand of friendship and say, if you believe in our values, and I hope they do believe in, for example, freedom, democracy, and justice, and social justice in particular, if you believe in those, we can work together.
I totally agree.
Yeah. I just don't think that everybody is on the same page, whereas you want to have the benefit of doubt that everyone's full of goodness. I do think that some people are just full of evil and only evilness. But that's okay.
Without mentioning any names, Audra.
Me, I am full of evilness.
No, not you. We can probably guess who you're referring to, yeah.
I just think that good cannot exist without evil.
Yeah.
They have to run in parallel. Yeah. And again, it's back to my metaphor of the pendulum swinging. The pendulum will always have both sides to it. So we have to learn how to neutralize it and really live in the balance. I do appreciate my hopeful reference is seeing female leaders right now coming up to bat and really speaking their minds and putting some of the very sensible conversations that we've been needing to have. And we see this happening on a global scale. The Mexican president, for instance, she's really logical when she speaks, quite witty as well, but logical, politics aside. So it's nice to see that. The Danish prime minister, Mark, we just watched this clip. Who was she addressing at the Congress that we were watching?
It was the Kiev summit, which marked the 3rd anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And she really gave a nice presentation full of a room of men that were actually giving her respect and looking at her. A lot of the clips that I've seen out of the US Senate, it's like people are just so disengaged right now that they're not even listening to each other anymore. You just have this level of disconnect, and that we need to call out and be like, why aren't you even listening anymore and engaging? Okay, let's wrap it up. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I think most people out there, just ordinary people, that's what they want as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm an optimist. As we say in England, the pint is half full, not half empty. Most people are on side. We're just going to mobilize them and offer them the leadership and the clear vision for the future. And as Heather said, with some real positive policies that will make a difference to their daily lives. It's not, I really don't think it's hard. That's why I get so frustrated with some of our party leaders. This is not hard. Yeah.
Okay, everyone, thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
We will meet again under another moon. And a happy Ramadan for anyone who wants to share and congratulate others. That's it. We'll be in touch soon. I have nothing more to say.
Thanks for putting this together. I always feel so much better after I talk to you.
Yeah,
It's
thanks,
that we
Audra.
have to realize that we have this commonality here, that we're all working together. And I have a lot of side conversations with people. I still have people that they call themselves centrists, but they still voted for Trump because they were single party voters. And I have civil conversations with these people. And it's because there's a lot of what Trump says that I actually agree with and have since day one. And I'm all about the dismantling of our democracy, because it has not been working. But the way that it's going about it is not really appropriate, and it's full of cronyism and all sorts of nepotism, and this is not good. So we are now living through a collapse, but this is going to be okay. It's needed. Coming out of this, we're going to go into this revolution, right? And it's going to be a healthier space. But the next decade or so, it's going to be rocky. Americans watching from abroad, make sure that you have, or watching from home, make sure that you have international connections in your inner circle. I think that's really important right now, because I do think the media is heavily propagated in America.
Oh yeah, we have full on state TV at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think actually in Europe, we're not so far behind, but I do think that people are not going to want to use the internet with such fervor as they have been in the past. I think people are going to want to leave social media, and maybe they're there watching, but they're not there contributing. Long gone are the days where we post pictures of our kids' birthdays on social media, because it's no longer fun to share. Everything is political now.
Yeah.
But yeah, and just adding Jordon and Heather's thanks to you, Audra. Thanks for doing this. If nothing else, we've got to keep talking as ordinary people, as ordinary citizens, particularly across the Atlantic. Yeah, because again, they want us to, hate you, if you like. Yeah, and break our contacts with America. That's the last thing we should do. We have to work together in solidarity with our friends and family and comrades in the US and vice versa. We're all in this together. And we, in our own little way, Audra, and thanks to your, your efforts here, we're doing a little bit to foster that dialogue and that act of solidarity, which is going to be very necessary. I think this is going to reach a critical tipping point. I think in months, not years or 5 or 10. I think we're talking about something really terrible happening in a matter of months, unfortunately. And it's terrible I'm saying that. I don't want to make anyone scared, but I think it's going to get very nasty very quickly. And then I hope it's over, and then we can move on. But I think we've got to be ready for something pretty scary happening.
Yeah, I tend to think that things have to get much worse before they get better.
Yeah, and that's not to belittle what's already happened to people, which is already pretty scary. If you've been working for a government department on some research, cancer research, diligently doing your job for years, and then you just get fired, that's pretty scary. That's pretty disrespectful. Yeah, this is already happening, but I think it's going to get, as Jordan said, much worse.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to come together eventually with the climate crisis, because there's going to be so many people that are climate refugees. I don't really have that much going on the rest of the night, so I'm down to stay here if you guys want to.
I'm tired. I want to go to bed, but
Okay.
you guys can continue.
I gotta log off.
And me too, I'm afraid. But let's catch up some other time, Jordan. And it's been great catching up this evening.
Yeah, thank you
Okay,
so
I
much,
shall
Audra.
scream into the void.
We'll all be,
We're like, good luck with your mental health, Jordan. Hang in there.
we'll all be screaming into the void, Jordan. We're just doing it on our own. Yeah.
All right, have a good one.
Right.
Goodbye, guys.
Cheers. Goodbye.